Imagine walking through the center of Manhattan, surrounded by the constant hum of the most expensive real estate market on the planet. You look up and see a mountain of glass and steel piercing the clouds, a $4 billion monument to human ambition and architectural ego. From the outside, it looks like a symbol of ultimate success, but inside, something is fundamentally wrong. There are dozens of floors where the lights never come on. There are thousands of square feet where the air is silent, and the only residents are the shadows cast by the setting sun. This isn't a post-apocalyptic movie set. This is a real, functioning skyscraper in the heart of New York City that has become a financial black hole. It has hundreds of empty floors that nobody wants to buy, and even more terrifyingly for the developers, it is currently in a state of economic paralysis where it can't be sold and it can't be refinanced. This is the story of the tower that broke the rules of capitalism and is now standing as a massive, vertical warning sign for the future of our cities. To understand why a $4 billion building is sitting empty, we have to talk about the sheer audacity of how it was built. We aren't just talking about a tall building. We are talking about a super slender skyscraper, a phenomenon specifically designed for the ultra-wealthy. These buildings aren't meant to solve housing crises or provide office space for growing tech companies. They are safe deposit boxes in the sky. But when you build a tower so thin and so tall that it literally sways in the wind, you are pushing the limits of physics and finance simultaneously. This particular NYC tower was marketed as the pinnacle of luxury, but as the construction cranes packed up and the glass was polished, the world changed. The global economy shifted, interest rates moved, and suddenly, the billionaire class that was supposed to buy these 200 empty floors vanished into thin air. Now you might be thinking, why don't they just lower the price? If you have an empty apartment or an empty office, you lower the rent until someone moves in, right? That is how a normal market works. But this is the world of high-stakes New York City development, where the normal rules don't apply. If the developer lowers the price of a single unit, it resets the value for the entire building. If a penthouse was supposed to sell for $80 million and they sell it for $40 million, the bank immediately realizes that the collateral for their billion-dollar loan has just been cut in half. This creates a psychological and financial trap. They would rather leave the floors empty and maintain the illusion of high value than sell them for what they are actually worth in today's market. It is a game of chicken played with $4 billion on the line. But the problems deep inside the elevator shafts go further than just a lack of buyers. There are structural issues that the brochures didn't mention. In the race to be the tallest and the thinnest, some of these towers have encountered engineering nightmares. Flooding from burst pipes on the upper floors, elevators that get stuck because the building sways too much in a storm, and strange whistling sounds that occur when high-altitude winds whip through the mechanical gaps. Imagine paying $50 million for a home, only to find out that you have to take the stairs because the wind is blowing too hard for the elevator to function. These technical failures have turned what was supposed to be a dream into a logistical nightmare. Word gets around in the small circle of the global elite. Suddenly, the tower isn't seen as a trophy, it's seen as a liability. Let's talk about the refinancing nightmare. Most people don't realize that these mega projects are built on a house of cards made of debt. The developers don't use their own $4 billion. They borrow it from a consortium of international banks. These loans are usually short-term, meaning they have to be paid back or recalculated every few years. When the building was started, money was cheap. Interest rates were near zero. But now, as the loan comes due, the world is a different place. The banks look at the 200 empty floors and they get nervous. They don't want to refinance a building that isn't generating cash flow. On the other hand, the developer can't sell the building as a whole because no other investor wants to take on the risk of those empty floors and the looming maintenance costs. It is a stalemate that has frozen the property in time. The empty floors aren't just a waste of space, they are a drain on the city's soul. When you have large sections of a city that are legally inhabited but physically vacant, it creates a ghost neighborhood effect. Retailers at the base of the tower struggle because there's no foot traffic. The restaurants that were supposed to feed the wealthy residents are empty. Even the taxes become a point of contention. New York City relies on property taxes to fund its subways, its schools, and its parks. When a tower is failing to meet its financial obligations or is mired in legal battles over its valuation, the city budget feels the ripple effect. This is a failing megaproject that affects people who will never even step foot inside its lobby. We also have to look at the global context. Many of the buyers for these sky-high mansions weren't New Yorkers. They were investors from London, Hong Kong, and the Middle East. For years, New York real estate was seen as the safest place on earth to park money. It was better than gold. But as geopolitical tensions rose and new regulations were put in place to track anonymous wealth, that pipeline of dark money started to dry up. The 200 empty floors are a direct reflection of a world that is becoming more transparent and more volatile. The sky-high safes are no longer as attractive as they once were, leaving the developer holding a very expensive, very tall piece of glass that nobody wants to use. The architecture itself is a fascinating study in failure. To make these buildings so thin, engineers have to leave massive gaps in the structure called blow-through floors. These are empty spaces designed to let the wind pass through so the building doesn't vibrate itself to pieces. In this tower, even the filled floors feel empty because the structural core takes up so much of the internal space. The layout is awkward. The ceilings are filled with complex dampening systems, and the living spaces feel more like a submarine than a penthouse. When you spend $4 billion, you expect perfection. What these buyers got was a high-altitude experiment that is still being tweaked in real time. What happens next for the 5-minute elevator ride to nowhere? In many cases, these buildings end up in zombie status. They are too big to fail and too expensive to fix. The banks might eventually take over, but even then, what do they do with it? Converting luxury condos into something more useful, like affordable housing, or even standard office space, is almost impossible because of the way the plumbing and the elevators are designed. These towers were built for one purpose only: to be expensive. If they can't be expensive, they don't have a second act. They are structural dead ends. Suppose you were an investor looking at the NYC skyline. 10 years ago, you would have seen nothing but opportunity. Today, you see a graveyard of ambition. Other cities around the world, from Dubai to London, have watched the NYC tower failure with interest. They are seeing that there is a hard limit to how much luxury a city can absorb. You can only build so many penthouses before you run out of billionaires. And even billionaires have a limit to how much they will pay for a building that has a reputation for being a financial and structural mess. The $4 billion price tag is now a weight around the neck of everyone involved. The legal battles are just as tall as the building itself. The owners are suing the engineers. The contractors are suing the developers. And the few residents who actually moved in are suing everyone. They claim the building was sold under false pretenses. They talk about the noise, the swaying, and the fact that their multi-million-dollar investment is losing value every single day. These lawsuits create a toxic label for the property. No sane investor wants to buy into a building that is the subject of 30 different active court cases. This is why the tower can't be sold. It's not just the empty floors, it's the legal minefield that comes with them. We should also consider the environmental impact. The amount of carbon emitted to produce the steel and specialized glass for a tower that is half empty is staggering. It is the ultimate form of luxury waste. In a world that is increasingly focused on sustainability, these ghost towers are becoming symbols of the excess that we can no longer afford. The shadows they cast over Central Park aren't just blocking the sun. They are cast over the very idea of sensible urban planning. A city should be a place for people to live and work, not a place for concrete dead instruments to sit and rot in the sky. If we look at history, we see that every real estate boom has its monument to the top. In the late 20s, it was the Empire State Building, which was originally called the Empty State Building because it stayed vacant for years after the crash. But the Empire State Building was a masterpiece of design, and it eventually found its purpose. It was built with a floor plan that could be adapted. These modern super slender towers are different. They are so specialized, so rigid in their design, that they don't have the flexibility to adapt to a new economic reality. They are rigid monuments in a fluid world, and that rigidity is what leads to their eventual failure. It's often said that New York real estate always goes up. It's the big lie that fuels the madness. But when you hit $4 billion in costs, and you have 200 empty floors, you have reached the breaking point of that logic. The market has signaled that it has had enough. The tower stands there as a vertical tomb for an era of easy money that is officially over. The lights may be off on those 200 floors, but the message they send is loud and clear. Just because you can build something doesn't mean you should. The refinancers are perhaps the most interesting players in this drama. When a bank looks at a loan for a normal office building, they look at the tenants. They see Coca-Cola or Google signed on for 10 years, and they feel safe. But who are the tenants in a luxury residential tower? They are shell companies. They are offshore entities. There is no business inside the building to generate the money to pay back the $4 billion debt. The building depends entirely on the greater fool theory. The idea that there will always be someone else willing to pay more for the sky-high safe deposit box than the last person did. But when the greater fools stop showing up, the music stops. And in NYC, the music has definitely stopped for this tower. Let's talk about the elevators again, because they are a perfect metaphor for the whole project. In these super slender towers, the elevators have to move at incredible speeds to reach the top. But when the building sways 3 feet in a windstorm, the elevator cables can whip against the sides of the shaft. To prevent this, the elevators are programmed to slow down or even stop during high winds. So, the more it storms, which happens a lot at 1,000 feet, the more the building becomes a prison for its inhabitants. Who wants to buy a floor in a building where you might be trapped for 6 hours because of a heavy breeze? This technical reality has decimated the resale value of the units. It's not just about the money. It's about the basic human need for a dwelling that works. Even the cooling and heating systems are struggling. Heat rises, and in a building this tall, the temperature difference between the lobby and the penthouse can be significant. The mechanical systems have to work overtime to balance the pressure and the temperature, leading to astronomical communal fees. A resident might be paying $20,000 a month just for the common charges before they even pay their mortgage. For an empty floor, those costs still accrue. The developer is bleeding cash every single month just to keep the lights on in the hallways and the water running in an empty tower. This is why the financial collapse is so inevitable. You can only bleed millions of dollars a month for so long. The story of the empty NYC tower is also a story about the changing nature of the city. For decades, Manhattan was the center of the world's financial gravity. But with the rise of remote work and the decentralization of wealth, the need to be on 57th Street is no longer absolute. High net worth individuals are moving to Florida, to Texas, or to private islands where the taxes are lower and the elevators don't stop when the wind blows. The $4 billion tower was built on the assumption that Manhattan would always be the ultimate destination. But the world moved on while the concrete was still drying. What can be done with 200 empty floors? Some have suggested turning them into data centers, using the high-altitude climate for cooling. Others have joked that they should be turned into vertical farms. But the reality is that the cost of retrofitting the structural core would probably be higher than the value of the floors themselves. We are looking at a permanent vacancy. These floors will likely stay empty for decades, a vertical ghost town in the middle of the busiest city on Earth. It is a haunting thought. Thousands of tons of materials, years of labor, and billions of dollars, all resulting in a space where no one ever speaks and no one ever sleeps. It is a failure of vision as much as a failure of finance. The developers were so focused on tallest and most expensive that they forgot about useful and desirable. They built a product for a tiny fraction of the population, and then acted surprised when that fraction didn't want it. The NYC towers of the future will likely be very different. They will be shorter, wider, and designed for actual humans, rather than for tax-evading bank accounts. But until then, we have to live with the giants that were already built. We have to look at them every day and remember the $4 billion that was spent to create a vertical void. The tower serves as a classroom for students of architecture and urban planning everywhere. It's a lesson in what happens when the ego of a developer outweighs the reality of the market. It shows that even in the most powerful city in the world, you can't just wish a market into existence. You can't just build a $4 billion tower and expect it to automatically be a success. The empty floors are a testament to the fact that real value is based on utility, not just on height. The refinancing crisis is only going to get worse as interest rates remain volatile. Every month that the tower stays empty and the loan isn't repaid, the pressure builds. Eventually, a tipping point will be reached. The lender will foreclose, or the developer will declare bankruptcy, and the building will enter a new, even more complicated legal phase. The sales will stop entirely, and the tower will truly become a failed megaproject. It is a slow-motion car crash involving enough money to fund a small country for a year. As we look at the skyline, we see the sunset reflecting off the glass of those 200 empty floors. It's beautiful in its own way, like a diamond that's been dropped in the mud, but the beauty is hollow. Behind that glass, there is no life. There is no innovation. There is just the cold calculation of a debt that can't be paid and a building that can't be sold. The NYC Tower is a monument to the end of an era, a tall, silent witness to the fact that sometimes the only place to go from the top is down. Think about the next time you see a skyscraper being built. Don't just look at how high it's going. Ask yourself, who is it for? Is it for the people of the city, or is it for a ledger in a bank? If it's the latter, it might just be the next $4 billion ghost. The NYC Tower, with its 200 empty floors, is a warning for us all to build better, build smarter, and build for the right reasons. Because at the end of the day, a building without people isn't architecture. It's just a very expensive pile of glass. And in Manhattan, that's the most expensive mistake you can make. The silence on those floors is a reminder that the most valuable thing in any city isn't the real estate, it's the people. Without people, the most expensive tower in the world is just a ghost. And in New York, a city that never sleeps, the silence of 200 empty floors is the loudest sound of all. It's a sound that tells us the market has failed, the vision has collapsed, and the tower is now just a vertical monument to what happens when you build for the wrong reasons. The NYC Tower remains tall and empty, waiting for a future that may never come. It can't be sold, it can't be refinanced, and it can't be ignored. It is the ultimate failing megaproject.